Good evening and welcome. It's the final countdown for the G20 summit in New Delhi with 15 top global leaders set to arrive here. This is India's G20 presidency. The scale of the event has been truly huge, but it all boils down now to the final statement expected over the weekend. While there are sharp differences over Ukraine, there does appear to be a great deal of mutual agreement on a host of themes, from sustainable economic growth to financial inclusion to fighting cybercrime to digitalisation. The big development today, the Chinese Premier Li Qiang will attend the 18th G20 summit in Delhi this weekend, but not China's President Xi Jinping. This was not entirely unexpected, and as we shall explain, not necessarily a setback for the host India. We'll also try and explain what G20 is all about, and since many have questions on traffic and other restrictions in Delhi, we'll bring you some key questions and answers. But first, the G20 is a huge process. How does it work? Parmeshwar Bawa has the details.
Let's take you through how the G20 works. Well, processes under G20 are divided into two parallel tracks, the finance track and the Sherpa track. Now, the finance track is led by finance ministers and central bank governors of member nations who meet throughout the year. Meanwhile, the Sherpas oversee negotiations all through the year, discussing agenda items for the summit and coordinating the work of the G20 as well. Now, working groups designed around specific themes operate within both tracks. These include representatives from relevant ministries of member nations and invited guest countries too. Various international organizations like the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development also participate in working groups. Now, issues discussed by G20 leaders have broadened in recent years, from just economics to include issues such as climate change, sustainable energy, international debt forgiveness, and taxing multinational corporations. Basically, every year, a different G20 member state takes over the presidency and sets the agenda for the meetings. This year's working groups have covered topics like financial inclusion, digital economy, the environment, as well as climate sustainability. Now, it is a big deal because, as you know, G20 members account for more than 80% of the world's GDP, 75% of global trade, and 60% of the population of the planet. Now, for the selection of the presidency, the 19 countries are divided into 5 groups, each having no more than 4 countries. And the presidency rotates between each group, and every year, the G20 selects a country from another group to be president. India is in Group 2, which also has Russia, South Africa, and Turkey.
Well, China's President Xi Jinping will be skipping the G20 summit, not entirely unexpected, but China's Premier Li Qiang will attend the Delhi G20 meet. That has now been announced. So Li will lead the Chinese delegation at the Delhi G20. Let's take a look at how Chinese state media announced the absence of Xi Jinping and the presence of Li Qiang.
欢迎出席今天的外交部例行记者会。首先，应印度共和国政府邀请，国务院总理李强将于9月9日至10日出席在印度新德里举行的20国集团领导人第18次峰会。
I am disappointed, but I'm going to get to see him. Thank you.
Well, the absence of heads of state from China, Mexico and Russia at this year's G20 summit is not particularly unusual. It's not unusual per se, in fact. From 2008, there have been 16 physical summits of the G20 and 1 virtual summit. Out of these 16 physical summits, except the first 3 summits in 2008 and 2009, there's never been a single occasion from 2010 till now when every country has attended at the head of state or head of government level. 6 times there has been one country below the level of head of state or head of government. 5 times there were 2 countries below head of state or head of government. 1 time there were 3 countries below head of state or head of government, by which I mean none of these leaders arrived. There was representation at a junior level, possibly at the foreign minister's level. 1 time there were 6 countries below the level of head of government or head of state. That was in 2021. So as you can see over there, it is quite clear that it's not entirely unexpected, and Mexico's president has in fact not attended a G20 session since 2018. Joining us now, Ambassador Manjeev Puri, India's former representative to the United Nations in Nepal. Thanks very much for being with us. How significant is China's Xi Jinping not attending for us here in India?
Vishnu, thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your program. Look, I think we have China there. The Prime Minister will be there. So as you've said, in the past also there have been countries which have not been there at the head of state or government level. I think we should acknowledge that had President Xi himself been there, it adds a little bit to the presence of a country which is truly a heavyweight in global terms in this G20 thing. But it isn't unexpected, and you yourself have highlighted this. There are several reasons, among them, our bilateral issues, etc. Having said this, I think that the way things have progressed is that we have made substantial progress on pitching for things which are important to the global south. And I'm sure in those, in various ways, we shall have the support even of the Chinese.
Do you believe, sir, that China increasingly finds itself somewhat isolated in key international fora? For example, in Hiroshima, G7, they were not invited. They did not attend. Over here, they have chosen themselves not to send in Xi Jinping. There's been this recent issue of them releasing this map of theirs, something we don't accept at all. We, of course, have the Quad grouping, which works in a sense against Chinese expansionism. There's AUKUS, of which we are not a part, but which does the same. So therefore, at one level, do you believe, certainly in the Asia-Pacific region, there is a sense of China being increasingly isolated?
So Vishnu, I am not able to hear you very clearly, but I think President Biden, when he said there is a sense of disappointment, of course, this is something we all need to acknowledge. But having said this, I can only repeat that we do have the Chinese at the level of their Prime Minister who represents China in several of these multilateral bodies. Now, therefore, China is there. President Xi is not there. It does make a difference. But, on the other hand, the G20 is about collective action. And that collective action certainly comes about by the presence of the Chinese at the level which is extremely high, their Prime Minister, as well as the presence of all the other major economies in the world. Let's note, we have Foreign Minister Lavrov representing the Russians, another major country in the world. And this is not the first time it has happened. He was there even at Bali. So it's the question of getting the countries and the countries in their entire heft behind the positions that the G20 takes for global good, for the betterment of humanity, if I may say so.
How significant would the absence of a joint statement among G20 leaders be? Because I ask this because the issue of Russia and Ukraine has been something where there's been no consensus.
So, Vishnu, let me put it like this. The G20 is not a treaty-based body. It is an organization where countries come together. They decide that either they will act nationally in consonance so that there is a global push, or alternatively, they make a consensus so that at the relevant de jure bodies, the treaty bodies which deal with a particular subject, the largest and most important countries will push in a particular direction so that de jure decisions get taken. I believe, despite the fact that, this entire business of geopolitics, the West saying that without Ukraine, without those issues, it's very, very important, even in terms of geoeconomics and the global economics order, and our and many others believing that the G20 is truly an economics forum and not about geopolitics. I think the fact is that if we get these countries together on several of these critical agendas, especially those that are critical for the global south, we would have made significant progress. And I refer to debt restructuring, for example, the digital public infrastructure, climate finance, reform of the MDBs. I look at all of these, and of course, the life agenda, women-led development. I look at all of these as positives, and where the largest and most important countries in the world actually are on the same page.
Ambassador, just be with us for a moment, because we'd like to talk to you about one more aspect, which is we have a package first. One of the most interesting aspects of India's G20 presidency is how it's become an all-India affair, with meetings being held across the country. In fact, hundreds of them, as my colleague Maria explains.
The Prime Minister, members of his cabinet have all been saying that India's G20 presidency is a people's presidency.
G20 की हमारी प्रेसिडेंसी पीपल्स प्रेसिडेंसी है। जिसमें जन भागीदारी की भावना सबसे आगे है.
So how did it become a mission for 1.5 crore Indians who were involved in this year-long G20 programs? 220 ministerial and working group meetings were held in 60 cities, and they were not just the metros, but in fact, 2-tier cities of India. 25,000 delegates participated in these pan-India events. India did not have a Delhi-centric approach, showcasing its vibrant cultural diversity and putting other Indian cities on the world map of diplomacy.
60 cities of India have hosted G20 meetings. I think no other country in the G20 has even come close to that record.
The third tourism working group meeting in Srinagar hosted 60 foreign delegates. It was one of the biggest international events held in Jammu and Kashmir since the abrogation of Article 370. While China skipped the meeting, officials from G20 members, which included Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, Russia, the UK, the US, and the European Union, all of them attended the inaugural events on the banks of Dal Lake. Varanasi hosted the culture ministers' meeting. Delegates, in fact, saw India's oldest city and also the Ganga Aarti. Just to recall for our viewers, this isn't the first time that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has attempted to make a shift in what was earlier Delhi-centric diplomatic approach. Now, perhaps it is all of India. In September of 2014, Prime Minister Modi had hosted Chinese Premier Xi Jinping in Ahmedabad. Remember that image of the two leaders on the traditional swing on the Sabarmati riverfront? In fact, in 2018, it was Mahabalipuram which played host to Xi. The world's biggest cricket stadium in Ahmedabad played host to the then US President Donald Trump in 2020 with a big rally dubbed as Namaste Trump. In October 2022, India and the United Nations launched Mission Life, characterized by a three-pronged strategy for collective climate action. Among the G20 members, France, the UK and Argentina have also extended support to Mission Life, and India leveraged its presidency to win the support of other members in this grouping. The Voice of the Global South Summit, in fact, saw the participation of 125 nations and reflected India's desire to actively engage the Global South. Just a quick recap for our viewers on what is G20. The G20 was in fact founded in the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis, and members represent around 85% of the global GDP, over 75% of global trade, and about 2/3 of the world population. Unlike the United Nations, the G20 does not have a permanent secretariat. Its presidency rotates annually among the members, and the presidency is responsible for bringing together the G20 agenda, organizing its workings and hosting summits. The last presidency was with Indonesia, from where India took over in December 2022.
Ambassador Puri, this is interesting because, it's not just Delhi and Mumbai, Kolkata, etc., where, we've had these meetings. It's been held in Lakshadweep, Arunachal Pradesh and Kashmir as well, besides dozens of other places. And this was the effort from day one. So I think that's important, to send the message that India is larger than just our national capital.
Vishnu, absolutely. Look, let me use this expression, democratization of the G20, inclusive, making it a people's affair. So let me point two sides to it. One, the people of India across the length and breadth of our country have felt that we are doing something which has hugely raised India's global profile. Can you imagine being a citizen of the country, not just in Delhi, but in faraway smaller cities, and getting the feel that my country has come places and it's going places? My Prime Minister is going to be chairing a meeting of the leaders of the world. How nice it is as a feeling. Just think about that. That's one side of it. Secondly, look at who all have noticed it. people from not just the 20 countries which form the G20, but about 40 odd countries in all, with guests and members and leaders of international organizations, all going across the length and breadth of the country and seeing how the G20 agenda is reaching out and how this global and local interface is being stitched together. You know, this is a game-changing thing, even for the G20, where earlier meetings used to be held either in resorts or in one or two major cities, and that was it. We have also gone further than just the geographies. A host of organizations in India have been roped in to do G20 events. These include think tanks, it includes the youth associations, women's research bodies, all kinds of institutions. So there is a kind of embrace of the G20, and in a sense, it is India coming of age in a very big manner, and with the people of India also embracing this, let me say, huge upward step up by India, the country.
Ambassador, thanks very much for speaking to us. I'm sure I'll be speaking to you over the next couple of days as well. Thank you very much indeed. Well, Delhi is all set to host our guests, the final heads of state conclave that's going to be held over the weekend here in the national capital. Lots of preparation. In fact, the principal secretary to the Prime Minister was at the technical airport of Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport. There'd be dozens of VIP aircraft which would be coming in. Therefore, security all important, and we'll be bringing you many more details on that as well. My colleague Neeta Sharma joins us for more on this. So, Neeta, will there be a large number of flight cancellations, and how are we going to be handling all of these VVIP movements from the air?
See, Vishnu, Delhi is all set to roll out a red carpet for all its world dignitaries who are arriving in Delhi for G20. We are being told that the Palam Technical Airport is going to cater to all the VVIP flights. As many as 70 planes carrying all the world leaders are going to land there, including Air Force One. As far as Air Force One is concerned, and a couple of other flights, they are going to be parked at the technical airport only. Rest of them are going to be parked at Delhi Airport, Bay 1 and Bay 2. When I spoke to the DIAL authorities about those cancellations, they said not many cancellations have taken place. About 200 flights have been cancelled, and these are small flights which thought they don't have enough passengers, so might as well cancel those flights. As far as arrangements are concerned, Delhi Police, including all the agencies, sister agencies, have made mammoth kind of arrangements, deep arrangements have been made, starting right from the technical area to whichever area these VVIPs are staying. The US President is staying at Maurice Sheraton, which obviously we know is at Sardar Patel Marg. Why that has been chosen? Because on the right side, Vishnu, there is the Intelligence Bureau headquarters. So obviously that area is well guarded, and that is why all the American presidents obviously stay there. Rest of the dignitaries are staying in most of the hotels in New Delhi only. Again, the New Delhi district is going to be no bar zone as far as the normal movement is concerned, but all those essential commodities can be fetched, and all those movements would be allowed. That's what the Delhi Traffic Police is been saying. So huge arrangements are there. The Indian Air Force is also on alert. Any kind of aerial movement would be banned starting from September 7th. 4 airports have been kept under the reserved category. So if there is any problem at the Delhi airport, so the flights can land at these 4 airports, which includes Indore, Jaipur, Chandigarh and also Lucknow. So these 4 airports have been also kept on high alert. Vishnu?
Right. Neeta, thanks very much for sharing those details. Well, in their quest to make the mega G20 summit an unqualified success, authorities in Delhi are taking a series of steps from decking up the national capital with nearly 7 lakh ornamental plants to painting underpasses, bridges and pillars to a lot of high security.
Over 1,000 special commandos spread across the capital, chopper landing drills on hotel tops and paramilitary preps at key locations. The national capital has turned into a fortress for the big G20 finale that will see more than 15 heads of state in Delhi in the largest and grandest G20 summit ever. As we travel through the decked up lanes of Delhi, with final touches now being given, a glimpse into the mega makeover ahead of the summit next week. I come to you from right outside one of the entry gates of the Grand Bharat Mandapam, where the G20 Heads of State Summit will be hosted in just days from now. And here you can see final touches are being given right outside. The G20 banner has been installed here as well. A new fountain as well has been installed, especially for the G20 Heads of State Summit. In fact, there you can see how PWD officials from the national capital also supervising. One important aspect of India's G20 presidency has been to showcase our rich cultural past to the world. You can see all these walls. This is a railway underpass. They've been adorned with paintings of various historical books like the Ramayana and Mahabharata. In fact, not just its cultural past, but also the fact that India has, advanced technological systems in place as well, whether it's dams or tunnels. They've also been showcased here, and a key part of Modi's cultural diplomacy, a key part of foreign policy. Well, right outside Terminal 3 of the Indira Gandhi International Airport, posters and banners have been put up. This is the approach road to Terminal 3. Of course, heads of state will be traversing this road to reach the Lalit, the Taj and the venue of the G20 Heads of State Summit as well. An important focus has also been rebuilding of roads, approach roads particularly. This has been done at a staggering cost of lakhs of crores of rupees in the past couple of months. In fact, there you can see workers are constantly working in the heat.
Very, very happy to say that 98% work has been completed. More than 100 fountains have been set up.
Okay.
Around 70-75 artifacts have been set up, and the roads have been repaired, footpaths have been repaired, green patches have been developed, and more than 6 lakh spots have been put up, both side the roads, to give a festive look. And you can see this. Now we are going to, adorn the trees in this fashion, these trees in this fashion also, so that when the guest arrives in Delhi, they should get a feel that Delhi is the most beautiful city in the world.
Delhi is the most beautiful city.
At the Taj Palace and the Lalit in Delhi, grand presidential suites getting ready to host top world leaders. Special chefs have been brought in to put together a lavish spread.
पिछले 6 महीने से हम जो तैयारी कर रहे थे कि मिलेट का तड़का हम अपने विदेशी मेहमानों को कैसे परोसेंगे, तो उसी के ध्यान में रखते हुए मैंने कुछ डिशेस बनाई हैं जो कि पूरा का पूरा मिलेट रिलेटेड है। आप ये देखिए, यहाँ पे एक फ्रूट सलाद है जिसमें कि मैंने पूरा मिक्स का मिलेट का तड़का यहाँ पे दिया है। आप उधर वहाँ पे जैपनीज है मेरे पास जो कि शिराय सैलेड है, उसमें पूरा मिलेट ड्रेसिंग बनाया है मैंने, जो यूरोप में एक काफ़ी फेमस डिश है जिसका नाम लजानिया है, उसमें भी मैंने एक मिलेट का तड़का लगा के दिया है।
20,000 delegates from 19 member states, special invitees, over 40 heads of delegations. The largest ever G20 will be held at the Grand Bharat Mandapam in the heart of the national capital. This is India's big global moment as the leader of the G20 and the voice of the global south. In New Delhi with camera person Kanan Patra, Vedant for NDTV.